Hey everybody, happy Friday to you. We've got kind of a blend episode for you here on Friday afternoon. We're waiting to be joined here by Jonathan DeLong of Cat Scratch Reader, which is another
Great name.
great. Oh my gosh,
The
yeah.
NFC South, man, they're just like
Yeah,
they're on it.
that is the exact thought I had on my ride home before going on the air, John. I was like, dude, God, I mean, not that Cincy Jungle's a bad name, but it's a good name. We like it, but I mean, man, those teams in the NFC South, they know how to rock it. But I am Anthony Cosenza. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, and it is John Sheeran flanking me and bringing the knowledge as usual. We're going to be doing some listener questions in the interim while we wait for Jonathan here. So we'll do some listener questions, and then we will also have hopefully a preview for you, getting you prepped for Week 9. John, how's your week going, bud?
My week's going good, dude. NFC games are always fun for me because when we do articles on the website, we usually take pictures from the last time that the Bengals played the NFC team. Usually it's 4 years in the past. So I'm looking at the post that you put up on Cincy Jungle. And if you guys have a question, be sure to leave it in the live comments on the Cincy Jungle article on that page. And I'm looking at the picture that you used and just looking at the players who are on the Bengals at this time. You have Uzama, Bobby Hart, Alex Redmond, Trey Hopkins, and Clint Bowling are the only players that I see visible. And it's like, wow, 4 years is a long time because, I mean, wow.
Well, I mean, this show, we had to show some love to Alex Redmond, right? I mean, we always got to show some love to Alex Redmond here. Yeah, I mean, you go through, it's funny. For those who don't know, when we go through the pictures and whatnot of stories to use and stuff, we there's a back catalog, and some of them, since these two teams just don't play each other very often, not even in the preseason, it's like, man, the pictures you grab for some of the stories and stuff are like, whoa, that guy's not in the team anymore. That guy's not in the team anymore. It's kind of crazy. But we're gonna get some questions here going. You can get in touch with us 949-542-6241. Call or text. You can email the OB Insider at gmail.com, and you can leave your questions for us on the live YouTube chat, the live Facebook stream that's going, and or on Twitter. So get those to us. The super chats through YouTube get precedence overall because those are helping out the Pollock Family Foundation. In case you hadn't heard, givesendgo.com/Pollock Family Foundation is the website that we have worked to create with them. We're aiding them and doing a lot of great community work. So your super chats will continue to go to them. Pretty cool thing there. Also really cool news, John. It was the Hayden Hurst salute to service, right? He's kind of the representative of the Bengals who was nominated. So kudos on him.
Yeah, he does a lot of work with promoting and spreading awareness for mental health as he has gone through his own mental health journey. Mm-hmm. So it's a great way for him to kind of spotlight the work that he's been doing there, and just a great week for the NFL in general.
It is. And while that is a good thing going on with the Bengals and the NFL, the thing that is not going well, John, and this is, I guess, where we can start. Jeremiah Woolsey saying injuries are stacking up. I hope we don't get any more of our depth on the D-line is thin. So obviously the news today, we can kind of talk about this, more of a comment than a question, but we can still talk about it here. The Bengals, we talked Wednesday night and we were like, hey, Mike Hilton should be fine. It's a finger, blah, blah, blah. Not so much the case. He is going to be out now on Sunday, and it looks like Eli Apple is coming back. So your starting corners now are Cam Taylor-Britt, Eli Apple. Then you will have Jalen Davis playing slot corner. And from there, then we also will have Dax Hill getting in the mix there. So that is a little bit of a precarious situation here as we head into this one. And I don't know, man, a lot of unfamiliar faces, and we're going to talk to Jonathan in just a minute about that. A lot of unfamiliar faces on both sides of the sidelines this week.
Yeah, you would think that this would be the ideal week to have both your first and second round picks starting at the same time. You have Dax Hill as a slot cornerback for the most part in his time at Michigan, but he will continue to be one of the first defensive backs off the bench in this one. Jalen Davis has a couple of years of experience on him. They might trust him to just manage the starting role better, but I can't imagine that leash is particularly long if Davis doesn't perform up to standard. Hill has the ability to fill in at multiple spots, so his depth in that regard is still very valuable. But yeah, Taylor Britt will be starting opposite side of Eli Apple, who he took that starting job technically against the Falcons, and then I don't even know if that would have been the case against the Browns had Apple had been healthy, but whatever the case may be, Eli Apple had his reps kind of diminished in the past couple of weeks, got injured, now he's back on the field because he has to be. Like Chidobe Awuzie is out until the next summer. So you have a lot of depth issues at cornerback. Defensive tackle, obviously, DJ Reader and Josh Tupou, they're still out. They might not come back until after the bye. So you still have a platoon of guys like J2 Fele, and maybe Dominique Davis gets up from the practice squad once again to provide depth at nose tackle. So, yeah, a lot of bodies being used on defense right now.
A lot of bodies being used. So get your questions collected here. And we'll get back to them now because I believe we have Jonathan. I don't know if we have his video. We don't have a picture of him. But Jonathan, do we have your audio? Are you with us?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. How you doing, bud?
Sorry about that. I was trying to get the video, but I don't know why my webcam's not.
That's all right.
Is that working?
That's all right. But we appreciate you joining us. And, a pretty big week coming up here. These two teams are not familiar with each other so much, especially with all of the trades and stuff going on here. Wait, just real quick, if you would, maybe get us up to speed a little bit on the health of the Panthers going into this week. I know, obviously, no more McCaffrey, and they've made a change of quarterback, so there's a lot of new faces there. But if you could you get us up to speed on where the Panthers are injury-wise and maybe some of the players that are stepping into certain roles this week?
So I think the one that most people will probably be the most interested in, and the thing that people probably know to an extent, is Baker Mayfield, the starting quarterback coming into the season, has been hurt. I think I don't really know. They've been unclear on the status, his health status, but he's been active. He's been the backup, so it's not a health thing anymore. PJ Walker is the starting quarterback on performance alone. Otherwise, the Panthers are missing Chuba Hubbard, who's essentially the backup running back behind Deontay Foreman at this point, and then Rashard Higgins and Justin Burris in the secondary, which starting safety and a depth wide receiver. So they're relatively healthy for this point in the season, and none of the big names are really out.
Yeah, so it's been a kind of a crazy past couple of weeks for the Panthers. You have a head coach who probably never should have been hired in the first place, fired with 5 or whatever years left on his deal. And then you have, like you said, the quarterback situation unfolding like it is. Philip Walker is such a phenomenal story in his own right. And I'm curious, just from your perspective, how he's performed under these circumstances. And honestly, has the offense really changed in terms of style and play calling and design, or is he just executing the offense so much better than Baker Mayfield?
It's a little of both. In the first game that Walker started against the Rams, he didn't attempt to pass the line of scrimmage until late in the third quarter. And that he threw it 5 yards out of bounds. So it was not even close. Since then, they've kind of opened things up. Walker's I think you could say he's a similar theoretical quarterback to Baker Mayfield, in that he likes to take shots down the field. He likes to push the ball down the field. But Walker kind of has this, which I think you kind of want to call irrational confidence, and that it's kind of the opposite with Baker. What we've seen all season was that Baker was just very hesitant. He's real quick to look down to the pass rush. He's real quick to bail on the pocket, real quick to tuck it and start running around trying to make a play and not trusting what he was seeing. PJ Walker trusts everything he sees, and he just slings it. He, coming into the season, I think had 2 touchdowns to 9 interceptions passing, but he trusts his arm, and when he's on, it looks like the Buccaneers game and the second half of the Falcons game, and he can push the ball downfield and make some plays.
Talking with Jonathan DeLong of the Cat Scratch Reader. By the way, Jonathan, how do you love the title of the blog that you write for? We were just saying, man, between the Falcoholic and your guys' site, it's unbelievable.
NFC South's got some pretty good blog names, right?
Yeah,
yeah.
For sure.
it's funny because I think we have like it's been around so long, and I've been associated with it for so long that I forget like what the pun is, but it is a pretty great pun for the
It's a good
name.
one. It's a good one
Yeah.
to be sure. Well, I want to ask you about this. I mean, John knows, and our listeners probably know that I live in Southern California, so I've watched a lot of USC football. So obviously, I've been keeping a little bit of tabs on Sam Darnold. My understanding is that he is now on IR. I think it's a lingering ankle issue that's bugging him, and that's kind of given Walker the opportunity to start here, as well as Mayfield struggling and whatnot. But I mean, is Carolina basically committed this year to Walker starting out the rest of the year, even if losses continue to pile up, or are they going to try and give Sam Darnold one more shot for a career renaissance if and when he comes back late this season?
I think it's Walker's job to lose now. So I think Darnold has been, if I'm not mistaken, he's able to practice again, and he's able to come off IR. It's more a matter of like he's not needed right now. So I think he's probably next in line when he's healthy. If he gets healthy after PJ Walker, the magic runs out. I think Sam Darnold's the next one to get another shot because I think Baker Mayfield, that kind of, not that Sam Darnold was any better last year, but I think Baker Mayfield had his like this season shot, and now we have a new coaching staff, a new play caller. I think if stuff goes south with PJ Walker, I think Sam Darnold's probably the next one that gets a shot because there's really no benefit to bringing Baker back into the fold at this point. Like they're 2-6, they're not going anywhere. They're going to need to get a long-term quarterback anyway. So I think Sam Darnold's next in line if PJ Walker fails. But it's PJ Walker's job to lose right now. Like if he keeps playing well, they're not going to take him out for either of the backup quarterbacks.
Yeah, I saw a clip from Panthers practice the other day, and it was titled "Baker Mayfield throws a dime," and he ends up throwing it like 10 feet over the net in the back corner of the end zone. So, I mean, at least against the Bengals, Baker Mayfield's good. So I don't know if that was a conversation to be had this week about who's starting quarterback, but I mean, yeah.
He apparently that was like a joke from a beat reporter.
I hope
like,
so.
Yeah, like Baker Mayfield intentionally airmailed the pass to into like the little media scrum that was over there. And I just double checked. Sam Darnold did return to practice a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
So he's eligible to return at any point. Basically, he has like one more week for them to activate him.
Gotcha. So whoever the quarterback is, though, this offense is interesting for me to dive into because coming out of Maryland, DJ Moore, like I remember looking at his production compared to the rest of his offense's production. He was like not just the main target, like it was entirely DJ Moore like at his best at Maryland. And now I'm looking at his production this year, and he has 59 targets, and the next closest Panther is Shi Smith with 18. How has that distribution been unfolding as these games going on? Like, is DJ Moore just like the most busiest receiver in the NFL, or is it a little more nuanced than that?
No, it was Christian McCaffrey before that. Right. So, and Robbie Anderson. So I think Robbie Anderson got a few more targets than DJ Moore early in the season. And then, I don't know what you guys know about the Robbie Anderson situation, but he's not here anymore after having a fight with the coaching staff on the sideline a couple weeks ago.
Right.
And other than that, for most of the time that Christian McCaffrey's been here, I think whoever's been the coach has been so enamored with how good he is that the entire offense is built around like we just got like, why would we give it to anyone else? Christian McCaffrey's the best player on the team with the ball in his hands. So it's just been like force feeding touches to him. With Anderson out of the fold and with Christian McCaffrey out of here, DJ Moore has taken that target, like you were saying, John, like what he did at Maryland, where basically now the entire offense is based around we just force feed DJ Moore the ball on almost every pass play.
Talking with Jonathan DeLong of the Cat Scratch Reader. I almost say fever every time I say that.
Yeah, I think I used to do that too when I first found the site, but then now I forget that. Like I said, I forget that it's even like a song.
I almost do it every time, but happy to have him with us talking some Panthers, Bengals going forward here. Look, I mean, we talked a little bit about Darnold and his future with the Panthers. I asked this question of one of your colleagues over at your website there, and in the 5 questions with the enemy, but I'd love to get your thoughts on it too. Steve Wilkes has experience in the league, and he is the interim guy. right now, is he also auditioning for a potential spot as the team's future head coach, long-term head coach, or are they saying, this is kind of a placeholder situation? We're going to go a completely different direction once the season's done, regardless of if this team, quote unquote, plays for pride, etc.
To David Tepper's, the owner, David Tepper's credit, he pretty much came out and said to Steve Wilkes, like, you get a fair shot to earn the job long term, but you have very long, like, it's a long odds that you're going to be able to accomplish that. Which I think everybody kind of understands that, and it's kind of like an accepted truth for interim head coaches, but that kind of phrasing makes it seem like the Panthers have to do something like unprecedented to give him a chance to stay, right? Like, if they're not pushing, like if this season continues, even though they're playing better, but they end up the season like 4-13, 5-12, or something like that, he's not going to retain the head coach position, even if he does have the team playing better than they were before. I just think it's, he has to do something well above and beyond what any rational expectations are for him to keep the job.
Yeah, and I mean, just thinking back to that Arizona situation when he was fired after one season for a guy named Cliff Kingsbury who's kind of looks like a fraud. Like, it's been kind of a weird
with Josh
weird
Rosen
trajectory for him.
Too, right? Yeah, I feel bad for him, and it's unfortunate for him.
Rosen was that guy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's unfortunate for him because he definitely got the short end of the stick in the Arizona situation, and I think he's kind of auditioning as well, right? That, like, if he can get this team playing this well, even if they continue to lose, like, they went from being a dumpster fire, losing all of their games, to now they're like losing all their games still, but they're kind of spunky. Like that, I think that could be appealing for teams that are like in disarray, kind of like what we've had as in the Panthers in the past, where Ron Rivera left us for the Commanders, where like the Panthers were fed up with Panthers fans were fed up with Ron Rivera as a coach, but a team like Washington, that was just like a organizational mess, was like so excited to have like a football like a football mind that has like NFL experience that can like get the guys in order and like run a tight ship type of situation. I think Wilkes can have a similar career arc to that.
John, you were on a track with a question as we continue with the Wilkes discussion. What was it you were gonna ask him?
Yeah, so I think the most interesting player to me in this game is Derek Brown, just because of remembering who he was coming out of Auburn. Not the most productive pass rusher by any means coming out, but he was a nose tackle, so that kind of comes with the territory. Now in year 3, he's, like, at least looking at PFF grades, he's by far the Panthers' best defensive player. Like, what have you seen from his progression just as a complete pass rusher right now?
Yeah, he doesn't put up, like, I don't know off the top of my head what his sack numbers look like, but he's become very consistently disruptive in his third season. So, like, like you said, defensive tackles are kind of hard to measure on stats. Interior defensive linemen are, just because the position itself doesn't own itself to like pick up numbers. But he requires double teams on pretty much every snap. I don't have it handy, but there was a tweet a couple weeks ago that kind of had a scatter plot of like frequency of double teams and how often these players were like winning their matchups, and Derek Brown was one of the top most frequently double teamed interior linemen, and he still had like an above average win rate. So he's become a very important piece of that defensive front. I mean, the Panthers as a whole are one of the better run stopping teams in the league, and he's kind of the foundational piece of that. So he's lived up to the billing as a run stopping defensive tackle, and he's disruptive enough in the passing game, even if he isn't putting up the sack numbers.
Jonathan, before we get kind of some of your keys and maybe a prediction to the game, I'd like to kind of, I'm looking back right now to the Panthers draft picks of this past year. Obviously they, Coral now on IR, and you've got a couple of guys that, Cade Mays. I know some Bengals fans had their eyes on him potentially. But obviously the crown jewel Icky is the crown jewel there of the class. But can you just kind of update us on how some of these picks are doing? Obviously, like I said, Coral now on IR, and not only how the class is shaping up right now, but also Coral's future. I know we talked a little bit about Darnold and their current quarterback and whatnot, but Corral's future with the team as well.
I think, I mean, he's going to at least stick around for a little while. I think he'd probably be the one in this position instead of PJ Walker right now, if he didn't get hurt. PJ Walker started the season 4th on the depth chart. Corral didn't play very much in the preseason, and the little bit that he did play, he looked really, really bad. But he got hurt in his second game, I think. So we haven't really seen enough to make a judgment on that. I don't know what he looked like in practice, but in the preseason games, he was not ready for the moment. You could tell the game was way too fast for him. He was really hesitant. I think in his first start, he led a game-winning drive, but it was half the yards were picked up on defensive penalties. He went 1 for 9 for 2 yards or something like that.
Yeah.
So the only real draft pick that we can that's played enough to really get a solid opinion on is Icky, and he's been fantastic. He struggled early on in the preseason in the first week or two of the regular season. And he looked a little overwhelmed, to be honest, but he's hit his stride. I think in the first week he got Myles Garrett. There was a stretch in the third quarter where Myles Garrett just ran around him twice in a row for sacks, completely unimpeded almost. And it was just oh no, this might not be good. But ever since week 3 or 4 or so, he's been one of the better tackles in the league, especially for a rookie. And he's given up almost no pressure, not committing penalties. Opening up space in the run game. He's been as good as advertised. So, and the Panthers have needed a good left tackle since Jordan Ghost retired, however long ago that is, and he seems to be the guy.
Myles Garrett typically does that. We saw that firsthand Monday night.
Yeah. You guys have plenty of experience dealing with Myles Garrett, but as good as he is, it was discouraging seeing how badly beat Icky got on a couple plays back to back. But he's figured it out now. It just took believe it or not, it took a few weeks to adjust to being an NFL player for an offensive lineman that gets left out on an island a lot.
John, you got another one for him before we get his keys, predictions, etc.?
Yeah, I usually like asking this question to people who cover teams that we don't have a ton of familiarity with. What is one player, offense or defense, doesn't matter, who has made the biggest jump or has at least been the best, most positive surprise to you just from the season?
The big one that we talk about a lot is Frankie Louvu. He is I don't even know, he's basically the Panthers version of what the Cowboys did with Micah Parsons last year, where he's a linebacker. He plays middle linebacker. He puts his hand in the dirt and rushes the passer sometimes. The Panthers had a 4-game stretch where they scored 3 defensive touchdowns. One of them was a Frankie Louvu pick 6. The other was a Frankie Louvu forced fumble that resulted in a score. He got a sack last week. So he's obviously not nearly the caliber of player as a guy like Micah Parsons, but he gets deployed in a similar fashion where he rushes the passer, drops into coverage, plays middle linebacker. And he has games where he's just involved in every single play and no one really knows who he is. And he's everywhere. So I think he's the big kind of breakout player on this team. He's been hurt for a couple of weeks, but he was back last week, and I think he'll make an impact on Sunday too.
Well, that's one of the key players, obviously, then that we would ask you about, Jonathan. So any others that you want to point out, please do. But how do you see this one playing out this week? The Panthers were so close to beating the Falcons last week, but nobody seemed to want to win that game at some point. It was unbelievable.
Right.
So
it
was
very it was reminiscent of the Panthers and the Bengals in 2014.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It's the same score, I think. Yeah, 37-34.
Yeah.
Oh, no, we tied, though. It was the Bengals and Panthers tied that
right,
game. It was Nugent missed the kick. It was the same distance kick or very similar kick to the one that Pinheiro missed to win the game for the Panthers this past Sunday. He just shanked a 39-yarder or something to win it at the end of overtime. Yeah, that's basically the game we had this past Sunday. But to answer your question, with Louvu, I think Brian Burns is the other big one on defense. When he gets sacks with in less than 2 seconds. When he wins his matchup, he wins it fast. I know your offensive line has had its ups and downs this year. Offensively, it's just going to be PJ Walker throwing to DJ Moore pretty much every other pass, and then Deontay Foreman's been really, really good. So that's kind of the main focal points on each side of the ball. And then the last one I'd say from the key player perspective is J.C. Horn, last year's first round pick, is becoming a star caliber cornerback. And so he's been shadowing team's best receivers and following them to the slot occasionally and stuff like that. But all that said, I still think the Bengals are going to win.
Okay. J.C. Horn, of course, son of former star Saints wide receiver Joe Horn, right?
Yep.
So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of names there, a lot of talent there, and I know it's kind of been a wild and not the funnest of seasons probably to watch and or cover from your perspective.
The last couple weeks have been better, but yeah, for the most part, it's not been.
At least be interesting if you're going to be bad, Yeah.
Right, that's where we've been last week was very interesting and bad, right? It's much better. It was much better than the first couple weeks where we were just punting almost every possession and not like we didn't even get to watch the ball move or anything.
Yeah. Well, Jonathan, appreciate your time. Tell our listeners where they can find you on Twitter or other areas where they can find your work, listen to you, read your writing, any of that kind of stuff.
So, I write for Cat Scratch Reader, which is the Panthers version of the Panthers SB Nation blog. Same thing, the Panthers version of Cincy Jungle. We do a podcast over there called Keep Sounding. I'm on that, and then I'm on Twitter as @JohnDeLong42. I don't really tweet much, so don't really.
We'll give you a follow regardless.
I'm cool with getting the followers, but you won't see a whole lot from me. But it's John JONDELONG 42.
Cool.
So appreciate you guys.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on, man. I know you had a lot going on, and we'll, if these two teams meet again down the road sometime soon, we'd love to have you back on, man.
Oh yeah, in the Super Bowl in the next next year. Maybe
there you go.
Probably not this year, but
yeah, there you go. Appreciate it, Jonathan. Take care, man.
You too. Thanks, guys.
All right. That was a fun chat. I don't know what's going on with the webcam, but that's okay. He's a man of mystery there. He's webcam wasn't working, but John, we did get a call during the interview there to kind of continue a little bit of listener questions here, and I think we've got John from Kentucky. John, are you still on the line? You hung on for a while, my friend. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. It's great to talk.
Yeah, good to talk to you. What's on your mind?
Well, I am confident that the Bengals will win Sunday, but it's not the end of the world if we lose. It won't be a shock if we lose. I was just looking at the Browns schedule, and a lot of teams have put up close to 30 points on the Browns. And the Cincinnati Bengals, we put up, 16 points? And it was 13. Most of that in garbage time? 13. Anthony, what is wrong? This team, and let's see, I know I'm getting old. We did go to a Super Bowl last year, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I'm not seeing Emma. Is that
no,
right?
You are correct. That is definitely what happened. And John, it was, believe it or not, in this calendar year of 2022. It was this very year that they went to the Super Bowl.
Right, exactly. Joe Burrow was brought here to score points, and from what I saw against the Browns, you might as well kept Dalton. Now, I'm not being foolish. I'm not saying we should have kept Dalton and not signed Joe. I got that. But the point is, I don't see Dalton much worse than what happened, and I just don't know what's going on with the Bengals. Now, nobody in the division's lighting it up, though. I mean, but the Browns are they were 2-5.
Yeah.
And, Pittsburgh's 2-6. We've lost to both of these teams. It's just hard to believe, man. Well, look, I don't want to be too pessimistic. I do think we can win on Sunday, and looking forward to the bye. I definitely want to be at the Browns game in Cincinnati. That's on December the 11th, because it's getting to where the Browns just have our number, and that's ridiculous. When Marvin Lewis was here, the Browns did not have his number. He knew how to beat the Browns, and something's got to change here. The Browns are not all that. So, like I just said, they're a 2-5 football team. Well, they're 3-5 now. So, we've got to get this together. So, what do you think?
Well, we talked about this a little bit on Wednesday night. John Sheeran and I did. And John, one of the things that I've just continued to be baffled at, just how the I don't know how you want to call it, but just how the timing of these games continue to fall on the Bengals schedule. And what I mean by that is every time in the Zach Taylor era, it seems like every single time that these two teams clash, the Browns' backs are absolutely against the wall. And they got to have a win, and they play with passion. They play with fire. Hell, the one time Zach beat them, that was a whole deal. I think it was at the end of his first season where the Bengals weren't winning any games, and everybody was like, oh, God, we got to get this head coach out of here and blah, blah, blah. He's got to win this game. And that was a win that a lot of people felt like, well, hey, we know how much the Browns games mean to the Brown family in terms of Bengals beating them. And that maybe was one where they said, okay, hey, we're going to ride this out. Thankfully they did based on results last year. But John Sheeran, I'd love to get your thoughts to John from Kentucky as well on this. But part of the reason is, number one, it just seems like just a poor matchup for the Bengals. We talked about that, but it just seems like the emotion, whether it's Baker channeling all this hatred that he had coming his way, being the quarterback of the Browns, or this week, losers of 4 straight, 2-5, and to kick off that contest, Joe Buck and Troy Aikman, Browns got to win this game. Browns got to win this game. Browns got to win this game. And they played like it, and the Bengals really did not. So now John Sheeran, they're 0-3 in the division, and the Browns keep giving them fits.
The Browns, at least ever since Baker Mayfield was drafted there, have not had a bad quarterback performance against the Bengals. Jacoby Brissett had a passer rating of 134. He was the NFL's worst passer under pressure entering this week over the last 4 weeks. The Bengals had one goal to get in Brissett's face, and they couldn't do it. Even with a pretty healthy defensive line, albeit DJ Reader's absence is noted, but he's not really known for his pass rushing prowess. They couldn't get in Brissett's face, and they couldn't pressure the quarterback, and it allowed Brissett to do whatever he wanted. And that's been the central theme in the Browns' dominance over the Bengals. Their quarterbacks just light it up. And they just had these completely picture-perfect, efficient performances, regardless of the Bengals' offense. Like, the Bengals' offense has had success against the Browns' defense, even in the Joe Burrow era, and didn't matter because Baker Mayfield at the time was lighting them up, and Brissett, nothing was different. The scheme was exactly the same, and the results were exactly the same. And on defense, the Browns have, in my opinion, the best edge rusher in the entire NFL. And even, you say what you want about Jonah Williams and his incompetencies and maybe his physical limitations, Myles Garrett's Myles Garrett. He's an alien. He's going to get wins, and he can single-handedly take over games. That's what he did.
That's what he did. And then, of course, as they got the lead, which is what you didn't want, as they got the lead, they built upon it with carries to Chubb, manageable, and then play action, utilizing that whole game plan as they have done masterfully against the Bengals. So at some point, I know there's no Chase, there's no Reader, there's not a lot of other players there. The Bengals got to step up and get some more wins consistently against this Browns team. John, thanks for hanging on, man. I know we kept you waiting while we were talking with Jonathan, but good to hear from you as always. And I trust everything is going well otherwise.
Hey, it's a pleasure. No, thanks a lot. And just want to give us a big hoo day for Sunday. I do think we can beat the Panthers. Let's just, make sure we win that game. We'll take the bye and see, where we stand. But like I said, that game coming up in December, I think the new rivalry now in the division for us is definitely against the Browns. It was Pittsburgh, but Pittsburgh's not what they were. But the Browns, that's a whole different ball game. So we might see some real fireworks in the game in Cincinnati in December. I'm excited for that game. But you guys, thanks for taking my call. New day.
All right, take care.
Thanks, John.
The interesting thing with that, John, is that, he kind of brings up an interesting point because the Battle of Ohio for so long with Marvin Lewis, even Carson Palmer and Andy Dalton largely dominating that series for some time. Now that scale is kind of tipping back. So maybe there's just a little bit more to that rivalry than before. I don't know if you agree with his sentiment on that.
Oh, I've always thought that the Browns were the biggest rival for the Bengals, just in terms of career achievements. Neither franchise has won a Super Bowl. Only one of them has actually been to a Super Bowl. If you look at just overall winning percentage in the Bengals' existence, it's definitely a lot closer than it is to, I guess, the old Browns, which would be the Ravens and the Steelers. I think the Steelers and Ravens, they respect each other more than they do compared to the Bengals or the Browns, just because of their recent accomplishments. And obviously the whole story of how the Bengals existed and were birthed from just Art Modell and the Browns situation with Paul Brown. So I've always felt like that was the true rivalry that the Bengals had, and it usually is competitive, even if the Bengals were pretty one-sided, favored to them for a certain portion of time. And right now, it's all on the Bengals right now, or it's all on the Browns, excuse me. I did want to answer this question from Matthew Steinmetz in Facebook, and he was asking, with Chidobe Awuzie and Mike Hilton both out going forward, with the corners not being very good, do you think they could take Jermaine Pratt off the field and play 3 safety sets with Von Bell, Jesse Bates, and Dax Hill? And I'm going to say no for this week, because until you have DJ Reader back at nose tackle and have a guy that can just occupy 2 gaps there, your run defense kind of needs all hands on deck, and it needs as much focus in the box as possible. And the unfortunate reality with Dax Hill right now is that he's not good against the run. He was not good against the run against the Browns. That's been where he's had the most snaps so far this year. The game is just going a little bit too fast for him when he's up close to the box. I think until you have that elite nose tackle there, it's really hard to run whatever personnel that would be with 3 safeties back there, to be really light in the box beyond your defensive line against a pretty decent offensive line. I don't think it's necessarily the right way to go, unless it's obvious passing situations, and therefore you can get Dax Hill a little bit more involved.
Yeah, Hill has had some ups and downs. I mean, he looked like a stud in the preseason, has had some ups and downs and limited snaps this year so far. But Pratt continues to still provide some nice plays in this defense. So, I don't know that you, especially, against the run, and he's a pretty sound tackler, I don't know that you want to take him off the field. Now, this week just provides a new set of problems, like you said, John, because this week is, the injuries are just piling up. So the Bengals are going to need to get some form of creativity there. And I think we're all confident that Lou Anarumo can kind of do that, but they're going to need to have some form of creativity there with all the attrition on that side of the ball. So I'm not a big fan of taking Pratt off the field a lot, but you do have some others out there that you can kind of mix in, Akeem Davis-Gaither, Marcus Bailey, that some of those guys that can do a couple of different things on spot snaps if you need them to. So, and again, I thought this is what's interesting about this question. I thought we would see a lot more, and I thought this was kind of the original design potentially with the Dax Hill draft pick, which is have Bates and Bell out there playing kind of deep, and Bell you can bring up in the box a little bit or do a couple different things with him. And then Hill was going to be that Ricardo Allen guy that's kind of roam the field a little bit and maybe play a little inside corner and whatnot. Now, between injuries and all kinds of different things, that has not been the case. So they just haven't done a lot of the 3 safety sets with those 3 guys out there all that often.
Yeah, and I think, big dime was the word that I was looking for there. You have 3 safeties, 3 cornerbacks, and a linebacker. Obviously, it does make you vulnerable to things over the middle and inside runs and whatnot, but you want to utilize Dax Hill in ways that he's comfortable with at this point. And I think with what Lou Anarumo was kind of alluding to this week, like they're not trying to put too much on his plate right now, because they're just trying to get him ready for when he eventually takes over as a starter for either Von Bell or Jesse Bates next year. Most likely it would be Jesse Bates in that case. So, it's giving him exposure, but the right kinds of exposure, where he's not doing a lot of things where he's not going to be expected to do so in the near future. So I think you have to be smart with what you put on Dax Hill's plate. And luckily they haven't suffered a lot of injuries at safety. So that opportunity for him in that role has not yet gone up there. And I think the fact that they're starting Jalen Davis over Hill this week tells you that maybe they're not quite ready to, implement Dax Hill in other various ways aside from just plain safety.
Well, our phone's been blowing up both in calls and texts here, and we're only going to be here a couple more minutes. So if you want to call or text, 949-542-6241. If you want to email the obinsider@gmail.com, we'll be looking at that. Live chats, you got to get those in there. We'll only be here a couple more minutes, but we've got our buddy Terrell, I believe, on the line. John. Terrell, what's going on?
How you guys doing?
We're doing good, man. Good to hear from you. Been a little while.
Oh yeah. I just think, man, it's feeling real good in Cincinnati right now, man. My fault though, Anthony, man. But I gotta say, I think we fine. I think we are. We fine. I think we're a wild card. Potentially still win the AFC North. We got a couple of hiccups with the rookies in the defense. The future bright with the depth. They getting stronger and bigger. That's all. They still young guys, even the line. And I just my main two questions to y'all is I know Burrow basically about to be the new Brady, the new, you know what I mean, the new Aaron Rodgers, whatever. But it's his way or the highway. Man, we got to do that affirmation or power or something. I mean, we got to switch it up or something. I mean, I know you want to spread that out and all that. And Zach, he been getting kind of just not really full of himself, but he think just because he went to the Super Bowl, he think he the shit, but he need to go back to his own ways and just being more humble and figuring the stuff out, because he real good at figuring the stuff out, but I don't know what's going on. And I'm sorry, man, Joe Mixon, he don't got it no more. I think he's weak. We need a third down back. We need some juice, and we need to back up some depth and receivers. And I just give it. I mean, like I said, I'm seeing y'all. Always Aaron, y'all always watching y'all, man. Y'all
appreciate
know y'all
that.
best, man.
I appreciate that, Tro.
I gotta say, man, we gonna be all right, but that's what I think, though.
All right. Well, we'll answer them off the air. I appreciate you calling in. Good to hear from you, man, and I appreciate the compliments.
No problem. Have a good one.
Take care, man. Well, so there's two things that really stuck out there. Obviously, the run game thing is one, but the other thing he said, John, and I'm not so sure that it is a realistic route for the Bengals this year. It's the wild card route, based on an 0-3 record, based on this logjam of teams right now in that 500-ish category. I just, it could happen. But, you've got the Patriots doing the same thing, right? They're kind of hovering around 500. Might they be in it towards the end there? Don't know. You got the Dolphins and the Bills also in that division that are, playing some pretty good football. And then in the Bengals division, you got the Ravens and the Bengals. Bengals are doing a little bit of this. Ravens doing the same, but not as much, I guess. And then, you've got the Steelers and the Browns still kind of collecting the occasional win here and there. But the Bengals are 0-3 in the division. I still think it's got to be AFC North, kind of similar to what it was last year. I don't know that wild card is going to be a super realistic option for this team this year.
It helps that there's 3 spots. It might just take a 9-8 record, which I don't want to say is the best case scenario, but I feel like most Bengals fans should probably take that at this point, considering everything that's happened. Again, we have no idea when Jamar Chase is going to be 100%. We have a good idea when he's going to be back. I don't think it's likely that any team, regardless of your quarterback, regardless of the strength of the rest of the roster, makes a deep postseason run with a cornerback group that looks like this right now. So once you get into the playoffs, everything's up for grabs, and it's just a 1 week at a time. But yeah, I'm not totally ruling out the wild card route just because the overall depth of the AFC seems to not be as strong as it used to be. But like you said, a lot of teams are going through the motions, and it's just been a weird year. It's all about, how you finish. And unfortunately for the Bengals, to your point, they seem to have a much tougher schedule compared to the other teams that they're going to be competing with those final spots. And having a good record against other AFC teams helps, and having 3 losses in the division is not good for that specific tiebreaker. But yes, the Ravens are definitely their biggest threat right now. Obviously, the Browns could still be in it. It helps that they won that game, but being neck and neck with the Ravens here, it should be their main goal, and that's probably was their goal going into the season.
The other part, before we get to one other text and then maybe 1 or 2 other questions, and we'll get out of here, but the other thing that he brought up, of course, was the run game, Joe Mixon, et cetera, finding a back that has some quote-unquote juice, as he put it. Again, there's Chris Evans sitting there on the sideline, and quote, he has his role with the team, is what Zach Taylor said to the media this week. I don't know, man. You saw some nice things out of the RPO changes over a couple of weeks, but man, when you lose and you don't run the ball often, obviously these questions tend to spike up. So
yes,
I don't know that I agree that Mixon has quote unquote lost it. He has had a number of touches and whatnot in his career, but he's still not an overly old by an age standard running back in the NFL. But I do think the Bengals need to figure out something, whether it's plays that are more conducive to him getting positive yardage. We know that he's having trouble breaking that first contact this year. But yeah, I don't know, man. They got to figure out something to bring some semblance of balance, I think, especially with the injuries to Chase, etc.
So is the plan just to do a 360 now? Like when they started with the worst run game in the NFL, when they were under center with wide zone, and then they made the appropriate changes to go into shotgun to make it more seamlessly, it worked more cohesively with the passing game. So they have one bad week where they barely ran the ball, and now it's put Burrow back under center. What? To benefit a running back who needs perfect blocking because he can't do anything on himself? Damian freaking Pierce looks 15 times the back that Joe Mixon is now. They're not doing anything special with Damian Pierce. He's just doing stuff, right? They've done enough to help out Mixon. I feel like he just has to take it. He just has to make the most of what he has to work with now because they're paying him a ton. They've given him new blockers. They've adjusted the scheme to better the blocking in front of him. They had one bad week. I don't think Mixon is completely cooked because, again, he was efficient for 2 or 3 weeks under that new scheme that they're running, which, by the way, has nothing to do or is completely different than what Frank Pollock has been known for in the NFL. So he's had to adapt because of the personnel that's been brought in, because it works better with that scheme. I don't think going back in a 360 to now the I formation makes a lot of sense. I think they need to stick with what they're doing.
Yeah. Good segue for a quick text. I don't want to go too long on this because we talked about it the other night, but Dan from Tennessee, is Frank Pollock the right coach for this offensive line? And with over 70 sacks last year and with the rebuilt offensive line this year, and the protection seems no better, and the running game has regressed, which he is responsible for blocking schemes. Thanks, Houday. I think, we can agree that the interior of this offensive line is improved from the past couple of years. I think Quentin Spain had some really nice moments in games for this team over the past the last 2 years, but still overall, there were some ups and downs there. But, overall, the center position has been steadied. Hopkins had a nice year a couple of years ago, but after that injury just wasn't the same. And then, you had, Karras and Kappa and those, kind of coming in, and Volson's had some rookie lumps, but I think the interior of the line has played a lot better than it has. But, right now, still the sack numbers are up there at 5 last week. We know Burrow runs into a lot of them, but it also is the protection of Mixon and running backs in there as well. P. Ryan, I think, has a really good pass blocking grade. Mixon does not. In
the past 5 games, here are the pass blocking grades for the 5 starting offensive linemen in this order. Alex Kappa, 78.5. Ted Karras, 62.7. Jonah Williams, 64.1. Lyle Collins, 63.4. Cordell Volson, 62.7. If you were going to tell me with a straight face that this offensive line is no better than it was last year because you're looking at one statistic falls more on the quarterback than the overall competency of the offensive line, I have nothing for you. This offensive line is so much better than it was last year just because of how bad last year's offensive line was. And this, honestly, it feels kind of like bad faith, man, because there were so many people wanted to trade a first-round pick for La'el Collins. The Bengals managed that situation perfectly. La'el Collins has had a not-so-good season because he's been injured. You know why? Because he's been injured for the past 2 years, which is why they baked so many per-game roster bonuses in his contract for this exact situation. But he's playing through all those injuries. His play has not been up to standard that we know La'el Collins is. And now people are like, why did they go after La'el Collins? Because you wanted it. Because he's a good player when he's healthy. Right. This seems like bad faith. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, the offensive line is performing better. There's again kind of like characteristic of the entire team. A lot of swings of inconsistency and whatnot. But and Pollock being right for the job. I mean, he's had to adjust, like you said, as well. So that's that's kind of where we're at with things there. And then Mr. Whisper, we talked a little bit about this earlier in terms of what the Bengals will do in the secondary, more safety help, et cetera. I don't know if you have additional thoughts. Thank you for the super chat there, Mr. Whisper, but we can close with this one. We talked a little bit about this on another question earlier.
Yeah, I think the logical thing is just to not go as man heavy as you usually did with Uzi, because you could trust him kind of on an island in those man-to-man situations. I don't think that really benefits either Eli Apple or Jalen Davis in this particular case. I'm interested to see, what roles and responsibilities and what coverages they deploy with both Taylor Britt and Apple on the field at the same time. I think a lot of people are going to look towards, this is where Jesse Bates' value kind of comes into play, but his job is now harder without those cornerbacks kind of, on their own a little bit. So, yeah, I would expect more, zone coverage just in general, because you can't necessarily trust your cornerbacks in man-to-man situations. Luckily this week, I think Terrace Marshall is pretty good, but he hasn't really been involved in the offense that much this season. Laviska Shenault is their slot receiver. He was traded from the Jaguars to them, and he's, been here and there. But yeah, like Jonathan told us earlier, it's mainly just been the DJ Moore show ever since Christian McCaffrey jettisoned for the 49ers. So there's going to be a lot of attention on him. I'm sure they're going to, keep Bates or Bell over the top of him and help out whichever cornerback is on that side. I don't expect either Apple or Taylor Britt to travel necessarily. I think they're going to be on those same sides. But yeah, they can't necessarily run as much man, at least with one of the cornerbacks, because of Owuzie's absence for now.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, Mr. Whisper, and thank you to those who submitted questions for this somewhat abbreviated listener questions live. But it was for good reason. We had Jonathan DeLong from Cat Scratch Reader doing a little bit of both. John, I thank you for your time, your insight as always. And hopefully the Bengals get back to that winning formula. I think tackling is going to be just a really big key this week. You can't with the guys out, Panthers will make some plays here and there, but they can't miss tackles and let drives extend and let them have continued life. I think that's going to be another big key, but we'll see what happens. The Bengals need to win one at home for sure. John, have a good rest of your weekend, man. We'll catch up.
We'll catch up. It's gonna be a long bye week if this is an L. So
yeah, crossed. I'm not. Yeah, let's not even go there. Yeah, take care, everybody.